My name is Lowen Rankin, and if you search the Forest Service archives for the incident I'm about to describe, you won't find it. Not because it never happened, but because someone made sure it didn't survive on paper. I'm telling this now because memory is the only place it still exists, and mine isn't getting any younger. In 1990, I was nearing the end of my career, 22 years in uniform. I'd worked fires, rescues, winter patrols where the cold burned your lungs raw. I trusted procedures, trusted logbooks, trusted that if something happened in the forest, it left a mark somewhere, an entry, a call record, a report stamped and filed. That belief is the first thing that was taken from me. The story that disappeared began on a night shift I wasn't supposed to be working. Another ranger called in sick, and I volunteered to cover. It was late fall, the kind where the days shorten fast and the forest feels like it's folding in on itself. I was alone at the station just after midnight when the radio crackled. Not static, a voice. Weak strained male. Unit can't confirm location, trees aren't. The transmission cut out. I waited for the dispatcher to respond. Nothing. I called back. This is Rankin at North Station. Repeat last transmission. Silence. I checked the call log sheet beside the radio. Blank. No incoming traffic recorded. That wasn't possible. The system logged automatically. Even partials showed up as hash marks. I wrote the time down anyway. Old habit. 10 minutes later, the radio came alive again. The same voice. Lowen, if you get this. He knew my name. That's when my stomach tightened. Identify yourself, I said. A pause, breathing, then, they don't want this written. The signal dropped. I grabbed the paper maps from the cabinet, thick, folded, annotated by generations of rangers. I traced likely patrol routes with my finger, trying to triangulate where the signal might have come from. But there was a problem. One section of forest, roughly 5 miles wide, had no coordinates. Not marked restricted, not labeled wilderness. Just blank. I had driven past that area dozens of times without thinking about it. Now that I was looking for it, my eyes slid over it like it didn't want to be noticed. I took the truck. Old service pickup, dented fender, radio antenna taped at the base. I drove without lights once I left the paved road, relying on moonlight and memory. The forest closed in quickly. Pines thickened. Sound dampened. The radio stayed quiet. Too quiet. About 3 miles in, the engine temperature gauge twitched, then dropped. Headlights dimmed for half a second. I pulled over and shut the truck off. The silence afterward was heavy. No insects, no wind, the kind of stillness that makes your ears ring. I stepped out with my flashlight and logbook. The beam felt swallowed by the trees, like the light didn't travel as far as it should. I marked my location on the map. When I looked back down, the pencil line was faint, already fading. I heard footsteps then. Measured, careful, not approaching, circling. Forest Service, I called. Identify yourself. No response. I moved toward where I thought the sound came from, boots crunching softly on pine needles. That's when I saw the marker. A wooden post, half-rotted, driven into the ground at a slight angle. No trail sign, no number, just a symbol carved deep enough that it hadn't weathered away. 3 vertical lines, crossed by a 4th. I felt a jolt of recognition, though I couldn't place why. The radio clicked on behind me. Don't log this, the voice said. I spun around, nothing there. I radioed back, who is this? A pause, then, you already know. That was when the flashlight flickered. Not dying, responding. Each time I pointed it toward the deeper forest, the beam dimmed. When I turned it back toward the truck, it steadied. Like something out there didn't want to be illuminated. I backed away slowly, eyes locked on the trees. The footsteps stopped when I stopped, started when I moved, always keeping the same distance. When I reached the truck, the radio came alive one last time. "Write it down," the voice said, "before they fix it." Then nothing. I drove back in silence. At the station, I went straight to the archives room, pulled open the filing cabinets, searched for any reference to past incidents in that sector. There were gaps, entire months with no patrol logs, index cards missing, report numbers skipped like they'd never been assigned. I filed my report anyway. Detailed, precise. Times, signals, symbols, environmental inconsistencies. I made 3 copies. The next morning, only one remained. The others were gone. So was the radio log from that night. So was the blank space on the map. And later that week, when I asked who had been assigned patrols in that area before me, I was told something that chilled me more than anything I'd heard in the forest. No one, my supervis, or said, "That sector has never been active." That's when I understood. The story wasn't missing. It had been removed. And whatever was out there wasn't finished yet. Once you realize something has been removed on purpose, you start noticing the seams. I went back to the archives the next day under the excuse of inventory. The room smelled like dust and old glue, the kind of place where paper goes to forget itself. Metal cabinets lined the walls, each drawer labeled with years, districts, and incident codes. I'd opened those drawers thousands of times before. Now they felt curated. Files weren't just missing, they were balanced, like someone had gone out of their way to make sure the absence didn't draw attention. Report numbers flowed smoothly. Patrol schedules lined up perfectly, too perfectly. I pulled a random year, 1982, then another 1976. Same pattern, entire weeks where nothing happened, no rescues, no wildlife incidents, no lost hikers. In a forest that size, that was statistically impossible. Someone had cleaned history. The name that kept resurfacing in my mind was Aaron Pike. He was a seasonal ranger in the early 80s. Quiet, competent, transferred suddenly according to memory. According to records, he'd never existed. No employment file, no training log, no payroll entry, but I remembered his handwriting. Small, precise. He'd once shown me how to repair a faulty radio contact with a paperclip and electrical tape. I found his name scribbled in the margin of an old duty roster, crossed out so aggressively the paper nearly tore. That night the radio came alive again. I was alone at the station, fluorescent lights humming softly overhead. I hadn't turned the radio on. "Lowen," the voice said, same one as before, clearer now. "You found the gaps." "Yes," I said. My voice sounded steady, but my hands were shaking. "Who are you?" A pause, then, "I was assigned there before it learned." The lights flickered. "What learned?" I asked. Another pause, longer this time. When the voice returned, it sounded farther away. "The forest corrects us." I grabbed a blank incident form and started writing as he spoke. Names, phrases, anything. The radio crackled violently. "Stop logging," the voice warned. "They're listening." "Who is they?" Static surged, loud enough to make me flinch. "Doesn't matter," he said. "Once it's written, it starts." The transmission cut off. I went back out the next morning. Not officially. I signed out a vehicle for equipment transport and drove toward the blank sector again. The map showed it now, coordinates restored, contour lines neat and official. But the forest didn't match the paper. The trees grew closer together the farther I drove, their trunks darkened like they'd absorbed more than light. My compass spun uselessly. The radio hissed, not static, whispering, just below intelligibility. I stopped where the road ended. There was no turnaround marked, but the tire tracks told a different story. Vehicles had turned around here many times before. I stepped out. The air felt dense, like walking into a room after an argument. I followed the sound this time, the one I'd tried to ignore before. A subtle shifting, like something adjusting its weight. It didn't come from a single direction. It came from between. I found the clearing. No signposts, no trail markers, just a wide circle where the ground was pressed flat, pine needles arranged in shallow spirals. The trees around it leaned inward slightly, as if the clearing exerted its own pull. At the center was a canvas bag. Forest Service issue. I didn't open it right away. I circled the clearing, counting steps, noting angles. My flashlight flickered whenever I pointed it inward. I opened the bag. Inside were a radio, smashed beyond repair, and a logbook. Not mine. Aaron Pike's name was written on the inside cover. The entries were sparse, cautious, observational. He'd avoided conclusions, avoided speculation. But the last few pages grew increasingly fragmented. Paths don't repeat. Distance changes after dark. It notices correction. The final entry was dated 3 days before his transfer. They told me to stop writing. That's how I know it matters. I felt it then. Awareness. Not a presence stepping closer, but a focus narrowing, like a lens turning in my direction. The forest grew quieter, the kind of quiet that presses against your eardrums. I backed away slowly, clutching the logbook. A sound came from the trees, not footsteps, not breath. A low structural creak, like wood bending under weight. "Lowen," the voice said, not from the radio but from everywhere. "You're carrying a piece that doesn't belong to you." I dropped the logbook. The pressure lifted instantly. I didn't run. I walked back to the truck, every nerve screaming not to turn around. When I reached the road, I realized something had changed. The clearing was gone. The trees stood normally again, no spur. Owls, no pressed earth. Only the bag remained empty. Back at the station, I filed another report. This time, it vanished before the ink dried. And the next morning, my supervisor called me in and said something that confirmed my worst fear. "You've been accessing records outside your assignment." "I'm doing my job." He shook his head. "No, you're interfering with it." That was the first time anyone admitted there was a system, and that it didn't belong to us. After that meeting, the rules changed, but no one announced it. I wasn't suspended. I wasn't reprimanded. I wasn't reassigned. Instead, I was contained. My patrols stayed close to the station. My access badge stopped opening certain doors. When I asked for older maps, I was handed newer ones with 2 clean folds and no handwritten notes. The forest hadn't pushed me out. The system had closed around me. I stopped filing reports. That was the first survival instinct that kicked in, not because I'd stopped seeing things, but because I understood now what writing them down actually did. It wasn't documentation. It was provocation. But silence didn't mean safety. Things continued to surface. Small things at first. A map on my desk with a section lightly penciled in that I didn't remember drawing. A radio frequency that activated on its own, always dead silent when I tried to log it. And once, just once, a logbook entry written in my handwriting describing a patrol I never took. The entry ended with a sentence I still don't remember writing. Archive corrected. That phrase followed me. In early winter of 1990, I was informed my retirement had been accelerated. No incident, no reason given, just paperwork already filled out, dates already signed. I was thanked for my service and escorted out like a guest who'd overstayed his welcome. On my last day, I went back to the archives room one final time. The cabinet where incident reports were stored had been reorganized. New labels, new numbering system, clean, efficient. Where my reports should have been, there were placeholders, blank folders, each one stamped "No record found." Not destroyed, not missing, officially non-existent. I understood then what the forest, and the people managing its boundaries, were actually doing. They weren't hiding something dangerous. They were managing an interaction. Some places don't want to be explored. Some phenomena don't escalate through violence or fear, but through familiarity. The more you name them, the more defined they become. And definition, I think, is what allows them to move closer. The thing in that blank sector didn't hunt. It adjusted. It corrected paths, erased inconsistencies, and reclaimed attention when it drifted too far outward. Rangers weren't victims. We were variables. Aaron Pike wasn't taken because he stayed too long. He was taken because he documented patterns. And I wasn't removed because I saw something. I was removed because I tried to preserve it. I've lived quietly since then. No interviews, no public accusations, just a man who learned to keep his maps folded and his radios off. But even now, decades later, I still hear it sometimes, late at night, in the space between frequencies. Not a voice. A pause. Like something checking to see if I'm still paying attention. This is the only record I'm leaving behind. Not paper, not film, not something that can be pulled from a cabinet and relabeled. Just words spoken once, carried forward by someone else. If you work in the parks, if you ever notice a report number skipped, if you ever see a map that looks finished where it shouldn't, understand this. Absence is not proof of safety. Silence is not confirmation of nothing. Some stories aren't lost. They're actively being kept from you. And now that this one has been told, it won't belong to the archives anymore. It belongs to whoever hears it next.